Hi, my name is Jenny. I am an English teacher and a slow reader. I recently read Pachinko by Min Jin Lee, and I thought it was really great. And because I wanted to remain in the world of that book, I watched the TV adaptation for it, and I wasn't too fond of it, and I thought I would discuss the both book and the TV adaptation here in this video. But since I am going to talk about a TV adaptation, I do want to take the moment to show my support and stand in solidarity with all of the striking writers in Hollywood right now and actors along them. It is ridiculous that they do not get the money they deserve, a livable wage from these major companies, when writers are the reason they have so much success. Writers and the actors are the reason why we have shows and movies that bring us comfort, happiness, and even challenge us. So it is ridiculous that they don't get compensated well enough by these major companies, and AI will not replace human feelings and human experiences. Pachinko by Min Jin Lee was released in 2017 and is a multi-generational historical fiction epic of one Korean family. First, their experience under the Japanese occupation of Korea, and then being a Korean family living in Japan. This summary will contain some spoilers, but it's mostly what happens in the beginning of the book. That's in the back cover. The book is divided into 3 books, and it spans from about 1910 to the end of 1980s. While the story begins from the main character's parents, the story really starts going from when Sunja, a girl from a small town in Korea that is under Japanese occupation, gets pregnant through being SA'd by a married man called Hansu, and at the time she didn't know that he was married. Her mother runs a boarding house and Sunja helps out, and a Christian minister comes by and falls ill while being at the boarding house, and they remedy him. And then because Sunja and her mother helped him out, he offers to marry Sunja and give her unborn child his last name. And yes, the story begins from how Sunja's parents meet, Honi and Yangjin, but the story really gets going from Sunja, and then it spans 4 generations. So Sunja and her husband and their family, Sunja's children, and then Sunja's grandchildren, and obviously I included Sunja's parents in that as well. I thought this story was really fascinating, and I learned a lot of history that I didn't know well. Now, I didn't know of some of Japan-Korea relations. I knew some information on the Japanese occupation of Korea, but I didn't know much about the history of Koreans living in Japan. So this story was really a great look into how they survived in the Japanese society and how each character goes through life in this society very differently from others, showing that there are so many different experiences. The story features an omniscient narrator, so an all-knowing narrator. I think having this narrator really well captures each character's thoughts, and I think the perspectives of each character are presented really interestingly and phenomenally well through this type of narrator. Changes between characters and their perspectives happen really naturally, and as a reader it's a fulfilling reading experience when it flows so naturally between characters and you are always kind of knowing what does everyone think. My favorite characters are Sunja. I feel like as a main character she is someone that you want to learn more about and you really root for her, but you also see some of her decisions and you're like, girl, please don't do that, but you understand why she does it. I also love Isak, Baek Isak, Sunja's husband. I feel like he's such a good man. He's such a good man and deserved way better. And I also like the arc of Noah's character, who is Sunja and Hansu's son, but then Isak gives him his last name. I like it because it's a really interesting look into self-discovery from childhood to youth to young adulthood to self-denialism. Being hurt by who you are or letting yourself be taken over by your true self. I don't know if that makes sense, but I thought that storyline was really well done. I would give the book 4 stars because I do think it's phenomenally well done. I could not put it down. It's a 500-page book, and usually when a book is that long, it takes me a while to read, but I finished it in a week, which is a good pacing for me. And I could not put it down because I wanted to learn more about the characters, including the ones that I didn't like that as much as I liked Sunja and Isak and Noah. I would give it 4 stars maybe because by the end of the book, I was just kind of waiting for it to end. And I feel like that's more of a me problem rather than the author's doing, because author's aim was to write a multi-generational story, and that she did. But for me, by the time there were details about Sunja's grandson's business world and so on, I was just thinking like, okay, can we wrap up the story now? So I think that's where my 1 star comes off. Yeah, maybe it's 4 or 4.5 stars. A really excellent book and like really great of a multi-generational epic story. So, as mentioned in the beginning, I was so interested in this world and wanted to remain in it, so I instantly started watching a series adaptation of Pachinko. And I kind of wish I didn't. Now, no adaptation will match the imagination that you have when you are reading the text, obviously. And obviously taking creative liberties while you are adapting a story is expected and allowed, of course. However, I feel like this adaptation went a bit too far in my personal opinion. So one major thing that I kind of did not agree with the adaptation was that they took the chronological order that was used in the book to tell the story. They took it and kind of made it non-linear. So we had one timeline of Sunja being young, and then another timeline where Sunja is older and we see the story of Solomon, Sunja's grandson, as an adult. And I personally would have preferred having the chronological order in the adaptation as well, because it makes so much sense to me. I liked the development of the story and how everything builds up upon each other. So not having a linear narration means that when you start watching the show and you are going through the beginnings of the story, but also kind of the endings of the story, you hear about some characters that you haven't even met yet, and like what happens to those characters when you haven't even met them yet. Now, major spoilers following this moment. If you don't want them, go to this timestamp. Like, for example, Noah's character. The series presented the beginning of the story really slowly, so we only meet Noah, Sunja's first son, in episode 6 out of 8. So I was really confused, like, why is it taking so long for Noah to be born? But then in the other timeline, in 1989, we already know that he dies. Now, if you've read the book, of course, you know that this happens. But if you haven't read the book, you're like, oh, okay, he dies. Oh, I just didn't think that it worked well that way. It was at episode 7 that I found out that there will be a second season of Pachinko. And that kind of made me understood a lot of the slow pacing, but I still think that Noah should have been born by like episode 3. Now with such like slow start, there was a lot that didn't get discussed yet because of the second timeline, and also a lot that was cut. For example, Isaac's story didn't really get presented that detailed as it was in the novel, which I understand why, but also it deserved to be looked into. In episode 7, we have a flashback episode of something that I do not remember being in the book. And it's the background or like one event of Ko Han-soo's life. So the married man who SA'd Sunja and impregnated her. He's like a rich man type. The episode depicted the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake, which was devastating. His story-wise, I was really interested in learning about this event that I had no idea happened, but character-wise, I do not care about Han-soo. Like, I'm sorry, but that character is awful, and okay, an awful thing happened to him. Okay, but he's still an awful character. That was a lot of awful, so I'm sorry. And as I mentioned, by the end of the book, when the novel was detailing Solomon's life and work and so on, I was already kind of checked out. I was ready for the story to finish. So when the adaptation focused heavily on Solomon, I don't hate the character, I was just not invested. And then 80% of the show, well, not 80, that's exaggeration, but a lot of the show was about Solomon. It's kind of like, I want to see Sonja and Isaac. What the hell? It wasn't the worst to have the Solomon plotline. Obviously, I still enjoyed reading it, but at the same time, I was kind of checked out by that point. So then for the show to focus mostly on that. Okay, that's the end of the spoilers, I think. Additionally, the omniscient narrator did not really translate to this adaptation series version. Obviously, a book and a series obviously is very different, but I feel like in the show we got very limited perspectives presented, as opposed to the novel, which showed basically every character's every little thought, which I really enjoyed. So when it wasn't featured as much in the show and we focused mostly on maybe Sonja and Solomon, I think the story suffered a little bit from not having such a clear omniscient narrator, but again, it's not the same. Well, as for what I liked about the adaptation, I really liked Sonja's character. I especially liked the depiction of Sonja as a younger person when she was like 16 and onwards. I feel like the actress did really well. I was so happy when Noah was introduced, and I was like, okay, finally we're moving forward. And I think episode 8 out of 8 was the best one, because I felt like the original storyline from like transitioning from book 1 to book 2, I feel like the original storyline was most well respected in episode 8. Now I understand you might be like, why are you so negative? I don't know, I was so invested in this story and I thought it was phenomenal, and then the adaptation did not live up to it, and this book, if any, deserves a proper adaptation. I think there were a lot of added scenes that had no purpose of being there, but some added scenes that fit really well. Now I think part of the reason why I didn't like the adaptation that much was because I was watching it with the mind that, okay, this is the only season of the show and it's only 8 episodes of a 500-page book. I did not know that it was clarified for season 2, and it was at episode 7 that I found out that, which made it more sense. But at the same time, I still think my points stand and what my feelings stand. I really hoped that what I found lacking in season 1 is just because those things will be delved into in season 2. And my concluding point is, go read Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. It's an amazing story. It's an epic look into one family and the multi-generational experiences of a Korean family living in Japan. I highly recommend this book. Yeah, maybe make your own opinion about the adaptation if you want to watch that as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If there was an echo, it's because we are moving. By the time this is up, we have finally moved. And yeah, I hope I see you in the next one. Bye!